Hi, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied, and this morning I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Bobby Malhotra, who's a partner at Winston and Strawn. Bobby, welcome to the program.
Richard, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here this morning.
So, Bobby, I invited you today because you have one of the more unusual attorney backgrounds I come across, and that looks like you did quite a bit of engineering work way back in college or even earlier. Tell me a little bit about what you did.
Sure, I think it kind of helps level set. I grew up in the city of Chicago. I'm a product of the Chicago public school system, actually, inner city.
Uh-huh.
I would say my biggest break came by getting into a magnet school in Chicago, where I had to basically commute about an hour and a half to get to the north side or northwest side in Chicago to go to that school. It was an engineering school. So I got hands-on early on to do, computer lab type work, electric shop, wood shop, automotive shop, really hands-on.
Yeah.
Um, I was fascinated by the technical being hands-on component of things. I went on to go to a technical college where I got my bachelor's degree. While I was in college, I got various computer certifications. I was doing consulting. Coming from kind of modest backgrounds, I had to work full time, go to school full time when I was going to college.
No way.
So that kind of led me into it. I think it was just by chance I got into a school that was heavily focused on engineering.
Hmm.
I had a passion for it. And then, kind of graduating and being in college late 90s, early 2000s with Y2K and the technology boom that kind of helped. And that's how I kind of entered the technology consulting engineering space.
Interesting. So what was your career goals at the time? I mean, I assume your planning was to become an engineer or maybe start a company. What was kind of your thinking at that time?
I was actually an engineer. I worked for many years as a consultant. I was one of the first people load testing like the 3G networks, cellular networks back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I didn't know what it would take to go to law school. I
Mm-hmm.
had no lawyers in the family. I had a couple CPAs, I had a couple of MBAs, cousins and uncles. So my thought was I'm going to take the GMAT eventually and kind of combine the business and technical world. I was doing a consulting gig in downtown Chicago at one of the major law firms in the early 2000s. And we were implementing kind of a whole network infrastructure, Cisco routers, email servers. And I sat down in a conference room and I explained to the managing partner what would happen, what the time frame would be,
Yeah.
what glitches that that we should expect, and kind of laid out a timeline for him. And he actually said, you explained that to me better than any IT person has ever explained that to me in my 20 years of being at this firm. You should consider going to law school because there's not many people
Really?
technical and who can actually distill things down into their basic components and having good communicators, I think has been a challenge on my part when it came to the IT world.
Oh, it's like,
So I was taking that evening, I was taking the L train back home, the
yeah.
train back home in Chicago, and I started Googling. I'm like, wait, what is? Oh, wait, there's another path out here. So,
Interesting.
I started looking into it more. I found out what the LSAT is. I started studying for the LSAT, and a short time later, the rest is history. I was in law school.
Huh.
But really, that moment changed my life. Up until that moment, I never
You
really
did.
thought about becoming a lawyer.
Ah,
I didn't
ah.
even know the name of the test.
Oh, I get it. I get it. Well, what did you think about law school when you got there? I mean, it must have been very different from what you were doing before. How did you like it?
I mean, I was very intrigued by it, particularly the policy and regulation aspect to
Mm,
things, because
mm,
that does heavily affect all facets of society,
mm,
including technology, right?
mm.
The whole regulation aspect and the policy aspect will basically touch every aspect of society. And at that point, the Telecom Act had just kind of gone through and been revised. So I was fascinated by the law,
Mm.
and I was really looking for a way to combine my technology background with my legal background. At that point, the only way to really do that was patent law. So I took
Right.
some patent classes. I took actually a couple of patent classes. That really didn't interest me as much.
Hmm.
Um, so, I was kind of torn, when I got out, what do I do? I didn't really like patent, or that wasn't my passion.
Hmm.
But being in law school, I mean, I thought just being so, interested in policy and regulation, including the tax side of things. I remember one of my favorite classes was
Wow.
tax
Interesting.
law. I mean,
Huh.
as weird as that sounds. So I loved every aspect of law school, learning about different phases. And honestly, I think to this day that the JD degree is the most versatile degree out there,
Hmm.
because there's so many different career paths for lawyers, and lawyers who want to kind of change, not practice specifically and kind of do other things. So I had a really fun, interesting educational time in law
Hmm.
school.
So how has your practice evolved and how do you get to use your technical knowledge now?
So my practice, I would say, let me level set what it is today.
Yeah.
Um, 50% of my practice focuses on active, large scale litigation, commercial litigation.
Okay.
I'm the lead partner on the discovery front, handling all discovery issues.
Hmm.
So whether that be negotiating the scope of discovery with opposing counsel, going to court for motion practice and hearings, negotiating the scope of data privacy issues as in the context of litigation, for example, when you're dealing with cross-border issues, as we're
Hmm.
seeing a lot of these days, where you have
Hmm.
multinational corporations and not everybody's located in the US. So you have UK, EU, and beyond citizens who are active custodians and relevant to the claims and defenses of a particular matter. And you got to bring over their data, but you have to not run afoul of the data privacy laws. So, I kind of, between 50% of doing that, the lead partner on large kind of commercial litigation cases. I would say the other 50% is focused on counseling.
Hmm.
And what I do a lot of is counseling on the e-discovery policy front, information governance front, and what challenges a lot of my clients and corporations today are dealing with is records retention, right? Particularly when it comes to new and emerging data sources.
All
So you have
right.
your text messages with which the regulators have been heavily focused on, and ensuring companies properly preserve those messages and produce them in government investigations. So that's become, kind of a hot button topic. And over the last, I would say, 15 months, I have a kind of an AI counseling practice, which has really been flourishing.
Hmm.
More of my work has kind of been going into that, where I've been helping clients draft their AI policies, whether it be their legal policy, so for the legal department, or broader specific business units.
Hmm.
I help them, kind of assess the underlying tools that they're contemplating on using.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that be from a data security, data privacy standpoint, or potential compliance in terms of their workflows and the new regulations that are coming out, right, with like the EU AI Act and obviously the Biden executive order that was issued last year. So that's kind of the kind of in a nutshell what my practice is. So you can imagine I get to be hands-on and technical every single day of my life, whether it be rolling up my sleeves and testing and negotiating search terms and negotiating AI protocols with opposing counsel, or kind of digging in to LLM models and understanding where's the training data coming from.
Hmm.
What is what implications does this have in terms of privacy? So I get to, I'm very fortunate. No 2 days of mine are alike.
Hmm.
So one day I'm very litigation focused. I could be preparing for a court hearing. And then the next day I'm at a client site rolling up my sleeves and talking to their technology folks and marketing folks on how they're implementing their LLM models, or
Yeah.
what their processes are for preservation of text messages. So it's a very interesting practice, and I enjoy every day of it.
So in your counseling practice, do you think your clients can they tell you've got this pretty deep technical background, like you can follow all their infrastructure and their technical things? Or do they are they ever surprised by that, or do they notice it?
They do, and I often tell them a lot of times I'm dealing with the IT contacts there, and I kind of tell them I was one of you guys. I'm on your side here. I was one of you guys for 5 years, but yeah, I mean they do notice. I dig in more than I would say most lawyers, just
Mhm.
because I kind of have that background, which is very
Yeah,
beneficial.
yeah,
And really, when you're doing, some of these, very technical counseling type projects, Richard, you really need to understand how the sausage is made, right? I mean,
yeah.
how can you counsel a client in terms of what's going on with their LLM model, what's happening from a data security and a bias standpoint without understanding what's actually where the data is coming from, how the technology is actually operating. So clients are oftentimes surprised about it, but I think that's been one of I would say my secret sauce and how I've been able to kind of succeed to this day.
Does that law firm partner get credit for having you turned on to this idea?
That law firm partner, it's funny. I looked him up many years after, and he had long since retired. So
Oh, funny.
that's a good point. I should reach out to him because he did change my life.
And it sounds like you're very pleased with your decision, your career decision, it sounds like.
I'm extremely happy. I wake up every day. It's not, it's not really a job if you're loving what you do,
Yeah,
right? I love what I do.
yeah.
One of the things, I mean, I think too much. I think at some point I can never let my clients' problems out of my head. So I'm
Uh-huh.
one of those lawyers. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the downside of things. But I got to tell you, every day I wake up and I just love what I do.
Well, Bobby, this has been a fascinating conversation. It was so interesting hearing your story, and I love talking to former engineers like myself who became lawyers. So thank you for sharing this story with me.
Richard, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
This is Richard Hsu and Bobby Malhotra. Thanks.
Thank you.